Okay, so we're going to go over the wiring setup that I did to hook up two-step on a secondary high RPM, like kind of a rolling launch control for pulls on the highway. And also what I did in my car to wire up the launch control, the primary, which is the lower RPM. I'm using that for drag racing on the strip from a dig. My car is a 6-speed manual, so I have it wired up to the handbrake. So when I have the handbrake pulled, I can go onto the line, stage up, and then I have my two-step. I can just mash the pedal, preload the drivetrain by slipping the clutch a little bit, and then when I'm ready to go, I drop the e-brake, two-step turns off, and I let out of the clutch and take off. So we'll go over the wiring. So for the first switch, this is a double pole single throw type switch. You'll see that there are 4 extra pins. These 1 and 2, 3 and 4 are for the LEDs that are on my specific switch that I have. And that switch is the Dorman. All right, so the switch I have is the Dorman 84944. I picked it up at O'Reilly's. It's kind of a bulkier, uglier switch, but I couldn't really find anything readily available near me, so this is what I went with. The only issue that I have is that I really wanted the LED to turn on only when I flip the switch. But with how I have this set up, it's just always on. And for me to wire it in, I'd have to have another switch just to control the LEDs on the quote master, and that's kind of pointless. So the switch itself, the 8944, the Dorman switch, the big rocker, it doesn't control the LEDs on the switch itself. It's always on if it's got power and ground. It's just, it turns on when you turn the car on. So we'll start out with wiring the LEDs. So I've got the positive pin 3 going to positive pin 1. Now my pin numbers are different from what's going to be on the back of the package. So I kind of made this schematic here. This is like if you were looking at it from the bottom, and then again on the side, let's see here, my mouse. So if you're looking on the side, so like if you had on off, say like up, my green screen's killing it. So the top would be on, the bottom would be off. It would be as though you're looking from the left side of the switch is pin 2. So you'll see here, like this would be the bottom of it. So this is the bottom of the switch, but if you're looking at it from the top, pin 2 would be on the top left side of the switch. So we'll start out with the LEDs. So I've got 3 and 1. I've got 3 going into pin 1, and then pin 1 going out to a 12-volt source, which I use the cigarette lighter because it's already pre-fused. I didn't have to run fuses. You can if you want to. Either way, it's still, if there was a short, either way, it's going to pop the fuse that's in the main fuse block. I think that fuse is only a 10 amp fuse, so it's going to pop it. The wiring is able to handle 16 amps. 18 gauge wire that I use is able to handle, I think it says up to 16 amps. That fuse would pop long before that wire got too hot to light anything on fire, I would think. I'm not a professional, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. And then for the negative side of the LEDs, I have pin 4 going into 2, which goes straight to a ground chassis. Now, what I use on the driver's side, I'll see if I can insert a picture here. On the driver's side, there is a bolt that already has a ground cable going to it. I think it's for the body control module is what goes into that. There might be a few grounds that go in there, but I just slipped my eyelet connector underneath that bolt next to the other grounds, and that's where I grounded this out. Now, I'm using a Lingenfelter 2-step box. So I have a green activation wire that's activated when you give it ground, and then I have a orange activation wire which activates when you give it 12 volts. The orange is the higher RPM secondary, and the ground is the lower RPM primary. So we'll go over the ground activation wire circuit first. So when you have the big rocker switch turned off, you can pull up the parking brake and it won't ground because pins 5 and 7 only close when the switch just turned on. So it's kind of acting as a master for that circuit. So if you wanted to just be driving around then whatever reason rev your engine while you had the parking brake on. Just make sure your master's turned off and you won't hit the two-step. So how this would work is you turn on the master, quote master. It goes into pin 5. When the switch is on, it connects pin 5 to pin 7, and pin 7 goes to the parking brake. So when you pull that parking brake lever up, it grounds out. And I'll show you a picture here real quick of that. And you'll need to connect your green. In this picture, it's blue. This isn't how I wired it, but this is another picture that I got off the internet. This is the ground activation wire, the blue one. You'll want to tap into this kind of this light green wire. You'll see it. It's if you're sitting in the passenger seat and you have the trim piece pulled off, you look in between there, you can see that there's a connector going onto some brass or copper. I don't know what to say, like a pin almost. And when you pull the parking brake, there's a small wire that pulls another copper contact that pushes it into it and grounds it. So when you pull the parking brake up, this blue wire makes ground contact through this green wire, and you can activate your two-step as long as the master switch is on. And that is the ground circuit for the lower primary two-step for when you're launching the manual car at the line. If you had automatic, there's a way that you can wire it with the trans brake. I'm not going to go over that here. That's not my setup, and I'm not going to go over something that I didn't experience myself because I'm not by any means professional. Now, for the 12-volt higher RPM activation, I wanted that on a switch that I could just flip while I'm driving down the road. And later, this is going to be really for like building boost. I plan on turboing the car later down the road, so this will be like for building boost on like a 40 roll or whatever I want to do. So what I've got is I got the orange activation wire going to pin 6 in this instance of my rocker switch, and then it comes out pin 8, and it goes into pin 2, or the middle pin on the other switch that I have, and I'll pull up a photo of that now too. So you'll see here on this you have a ground. Let's see if I can kind of pull them up side by side. So ground in this instance on my wiring diagram is pin 1. The accessory is pin 2, and you have a power that comes from your 12-volt source. I'm using the cigarette lighter in this case. So how this works is 12 volts will come from the cigarette lighter into pin 3, or the power pin. And when you flip the switch, it delivers 12 volts to pin 2 and through the LED that's on this switch and into pin 1 to be grounded out to light up the LED. I wanted a LED on my rolling two-step switch, so that way I wouldn't have it activated while I had the parking brake activated. That way it's just kind of a precaution for me to know. So yeah, it goes from the 12-volt source to pin 3, or the power pin. And then for the LED circuit that's on the light switch, it goes through the LED, comes out pin 1 and goes to the ground. And for the two-step box itself, it'll come in through pin 3, out through pin 2, hits pin 8, comes out pin 6 and into the box. So that way your master still controls it. So if your master's turned off and you turn on the switch, the LED will turn on, but the two-step itself will not be active. And you can verify this on the Lingenfelter two-step box. It has a indicator light that flashes fast green for the secondary launch control, and a slow green for the primary, or the lower RPM launch control. So that's how I wired mine up. We'll go back to the car, and I can show you where I put it on mine. It's a little ugly. My car, I don't care. Okay, so now that we're out in the garage, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I mounted my Lingenfelter two-step box into my 15 Camaro, and how I ran all the wirings. Wiring. It's not plural.
Well, duh.
All right. So I went ahead and mounted my two-step box right next to the intake. I put it here because I have a rotofab intake that has kind of like this heat shielding around it. It was pretty specific on the instructions to keep it away from heat. So I routed the wiring that's for the coil packs through that little slit there. Let's see if I can get some light on it for you. In that little slit there between the heat shield and the fender. Went ahead and zip tied it, secured it up and out of the way onto the BMR strut tower bar brace. And then yeah, just plugs in with some simple clips. One goes to one side of the coil pack harness, the other one goes to the other side. It's male, female, you can't screw it up. So it doesn't matter which harness goes to which side of the engine. They said that it doesn't matter in their installation instructions. So, and then for the trigger wires that I showed you the diagram on earlier, that is there's the orange one. I'm not sure if you guys will be able to read that or not, but it says the orange one is the 12 volt secondary activation, and the green one is the primary ground activation. You can set your RPM there. I don't have mine set up yet. I think I'm gonna do something like probably 5,000 or 55 on the secondary, and then whatever the track can handle on my primary launch. Just depends on the track day. I have it zip tied, secured to the hood release cable. I'm gonna cut the zip ties, don't worry about that. But there is, I'm gonna see if I can get you guys in here, but there is a little grommet that you can push your wiring through. Let's see if I can. Let's see here. I'll have to take a picture of it later and show you guys, but there's a small grommet just above the positive cable that comes from the battery in the trunk, and it goes through the cabin. It runs through the firewall, but there's a small grommet just above where that wire comes through, and you can poke that out. Be ready to catch it if you're wanting to run the wiring through the grommet. Mine grommet fell down and I can't get to it. It's under the carpet in the car, so I just have my wires going through. I taped them up so they wouldn't chafe, and they're going through that small hole. I recommend trying to catch that grommet and just poking a small hole in the grommet and using the grommet as kind of the isolator, kind of what they're meant for. And it's a thicker rubber than, it would protect it better than electrical tape will. So from that hole, it goes into my driver's side of my car. Kind of see where it comes through it. And then I've got it just kind of zip tied up to this tray here, or the bottom of the dash, and then it runs through. This is the, let's see if I can get it in here. This is the ground bolt that I was telling you guys about, that I use to connect the two grounds to from the LEDs and the ground for the secondary switch for the secondary RPM. And then I ran my wires behind the carpet here, just kind of trying to keep them out of the way so they don't get pinched up by the panel clips. But yep, this is the switch for the master. So that's on, that's off. And then this is the switch for the secondary higher RPM. And then obviously the handbrake I have for the lower RPM launches. So I'll go ahead and turn on the car so you guys can see what the switches in that look like with the car turned on. Let's go ahead and turn on the car. Like I said, the lights aren't controlled by the switch itself, so it doesn't matter if you have it on or off. The lights are always on with the way I have it wired up. What you would really need for it to be all controlled would be, technically it's a triple pole single throw. So what that means is there would be 3 individual circuits running, one for the LED, another for the ground activation circuit, and another for the secondary activation circuit. So you'd have, like I said, the first circuit would be for the LED on the master, and then the second one would be for this secondary activation, and the other one would be for the lower RPM activation. But yeah, that's how I've got mine set up. This isn't the prettiest thing in the world. You know, not gonna fib about that at all. It's pretty rudimentary. A new center console's like, I think I found them online for like 100 and, what did I pay for my other one? It was like 120 or 150 bucks. So if you can get a tighter switch or a smaller switch that doesn't have, this switch is really thick. So like from the faceplate to the pins is like probably 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches. So it's really thick, so I had to put mine here. But if you can find a thin enough switch that'll work for the setup, I'd recommend doing it, drilling through this piece that goes on the side here. It goes up against the side and hides those wires. I'd recommend going through this because I think this piece, I think I found it online for like 30 bucks or something like that. So I'd recommend doing that if you can. Again, I was just using what I had readily available, so I didn't go that route. But yeah, that way you have a more easily replaceable piece. I really don't care. But yeah, that's the setup that I did for my two-step box. Let me know if it helped you out. Comment any suggestions. I'd like to hear it. And we'll catch you next time.
But wait, there's more.
So I forgot to mention, I wanted to show you guys the activation lights and how it all, I guess, works. I think it'd be beneficial for you all to see the activation lights on the box itself when I throw my switches. So we'll go ahead and go into the car and I'll show you. Okay, so go ahead and turn it on. So, wrong way. So, switch is off. The two-step box gets power from the coil pack, so the box itself is on, but none of the circuits for the for the secondary activation has been quote-unquote activated. However, my master is still off. So when I go to the two-step box, you'll see that the green light is not flashing. So I've got no flash there. But when I throw the master on now, since I have the secondary activation switch on, when I pop the master to on, it will activate the circuit because now both switches are on. So you can see here the red light indicating that the box has power and the flashing green light indicating that the higher RPM secondary switch is on. So for the secondary higher RPM, it'll flash quickly, and then for the primary lower RPM, it'll flash slower. So I'll show you that here real quick too. So I'll go ahead and turn off the secondary higher RPM activation, and my master switch is still on, and you'll see that I have no green light, no flashing green light. Okay, now when I pull this e-brake, like I would be doing to help me preload the drivetrain when I launch, you'll see now that my lower RPM is now activated. Slower blink. And when I shut off the master, that will kill that, so you can still use your parking brake normally and not have to worry about the two-step being on when you're just trying to use the parking brake. See, the light is off. So anyway, that will actually do it this time around. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!